what is something that you think back on when you were young that shaped who you are today? For me, it's reading. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, I absolutely hated reading. I thought it was the most dull thing in the world. I could never focus. I couldn't pick up a book. But then one day I picked up the book Harry Potter. And from that moment, everything changed. After picking up that book, I couldn't put it down. I brought it everywhere with me. When I went to school, when I went to bed. When I would go to bed, I would lay at the foot of my bed under my nightlight and read Harry Potter, because if I turned the light on, my parents would know I was awake and they'd be angry with me. But that was how much I loved that book. For J.K. Rowling, it was the opposite. She was a born reader, and by the age of 6, she had already written her first book. And by the age of 11, she had already written her first novel. Rowling used her love for her family and her love for books in general to shape who she is today. And she has become an inspiration in the literary world. She has become one of the most successful authors of our time. And she has achieved countless merits, such as the Legion of the Honor Award. She's achieved countless other merits, and she has also been able to maintain herself as a political activist and a humanitarian at heart. And doing so, she was able to accomplish all this when most of her life she lived in poverty and despair, but she was still able to follow her dreams. The whole world told J.K. Rowling that she couldn't, but she did. When J.K. Rowling was only 11 years old, she wrote her first novel. Unknowingly, this would be the start of many other pivotal novels to come. As stated in the About column of J.K. Rowling's official website, written by J.K. Rowling and for J.K. Rowling, Rowling grew up surrounded by books. She described herself as the typical garden bookworm, complete with freckles and national health spectacles. Rowling grew up loving books. She often read to her younger sister and used her love of novels to shape not only her own life, but her sister's as well. Rowling wrote her first book at the age of 6, and this book she entitled Rabbit. And then at age 11, she went on to writing her first novel, which was a story about 7 cursed diamonds and the results that the people who owned them faced. But things weren't always great for Rowling. Later on down the road, a little bit after her adolescent childhood, she struck major despair and major grief and hardship. When she was 15, Rowling's mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she passed away about a decade later. But when this occurred, Rowling's life took a huge turn for the worst. She became very, very, very down on herself and on her life, and it very much affected her, as it still does today. Rowling had been struck with the idea of writing Harry Potter while she was sitting on a train, which I always thought was funny because Harry Potter also has a train, the Hogwarts Express. As stated in an article on Insider Inc., how J.K. Rowling went from struggling single mom to the most successful author in the world, written by Jacob Shamsian in 2018, Rowling described her mother's passing as one of the most traumatizing experiences in her life. She described the feeling of getting the call as a white panic in her brain, and she could not grasp the tremendous blow that her mother's death was going to have on her. But despite this, she was very, very dedicated to still moving on with her writing. Shortly after her mother's death in 1995, she began a state of depression. Following a brief marriage to her then husband, George Arantes, Rowling had a daughter with him named Jessica. However, tragedy struck her again when her relationship didn't exactly work and she ended up getting divorced with Arantes. After her divorce, Rowling was alone again. So she didn't really have any form of monetary gain or any sort of currency, so she was struggling, and she was raising a child by herself at 28 years old. Rowling dealt with severe depression. She was living on welfare, raising a child as she described, was the poorest condition short of being homeless, which means she was right there. She could be out on the streets in one more step. Rowling spoke of very dark thoughts during this time. She had thoughts of suicide, taking her own life, and it was all because of the struggles that she was dealing with, all the pressure and the stigmatization on her shoulders. But throughout this, she was able to maintain her life and continue doing what she loved most, which was writing. She would go to local cafes and just sit there with her typewriter and type stories and have her daughter sitting in a pram right next to her because she couldn't leave her alone. When all hope seemed lost for Rowling, after countless attempts of publishing her work failed, she finally saw a glimmer of light. And this glimmer of light was that after 12 attempts of publishing her novel that failed, finally a small, obscure literary agent by the name of Christopher Little finally accepted her work, and he was able to arrange for the publishing 500 copies of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. They were printed and distributed, and after all this anticipation, her work was finally published, and it was a hit. It blew up. Her career made a historical skyrocket. It went from rock bottom to soaring up. She even stated that she was not able to keep up with the amount of money and fame that was being thrown her way. She just couldn't, it was too much for her. All she knew was writing. It was so quick. So that's all she tried to focus on. In fact, she made so much money during this time that in 2004, Forbes magazine named her the first ever person, not just woman, but the first ever person to become a billionaire off writing. What I found funny about that was she quickly was dropped off that list because they couldn't keep up with the amount she was donating to charity. So by the time that they named her that, she had already wasn't a billionaire anymore because of the amount of money that she donated. She dedicated herself to helping the world, and she has become the president of many, many important organizations, including Gingerbread, which is a 100-year-old organization dedicated to financially and emotionally supporting single parents like she used to be. As well as the organization she named Lumos, which is a Harry Potter reference, to stop the institutionalization of children. Rowling spoke of how being a single mother has followed her whole life. Throughout her whole career, people have told her that she was a single mother and that this could all not be possible, that she went through a lot. But she always described it as being what shaped who she is today. Rowling wrote an essay once that she would say to any parent feeling the weight and stigmatization of raising their child on their own and on welfare, that her time as being a single mother was the single proudest time of her life. She has made billions. She's made movies and books, but the proudest time of her life was when she was dead poor and she just was raising her daughter. And I would agree. An article in The Guardian in 2009 titled "Harry Potter Author Knighted in France" by Alison Flood states that in 2009, J.K. Rowling was awarded France's highest honor by the French president. The award was called Legion d'Honneur. This award was the highest civilian award one could earn, and she earned it for her work in literature. The French president described Rowling as giving back children the desire to read and to teach them that reading is not a punishment, but really just a source of pleasure. He thanked her for showing this to children all around the world, because without it, who knows, the future of literature could have gone a completely different way. In conclusion, Rowling has had an extraordinary life and career. She has overcome despair, desperation, poverty, and has become one of the greatest authors of our time. She has hit rock bottom, and from there has risen higher than her dreams. Her humble beginnings have taught her that money is not as important as who you are, and that you should always follow your heart, and helping her fellow man is more important than anything else. Her writing speaks for itself. In doing so, she has still been able to achieve prestigious awards and merits just based off of who she is. I started this speech off by describing how J.K. Rowling has given me the desire back to read. But I think really, J.K. Rowling has helped me rediscover something else. She's helped me rediscover the courage to follow my dreams. And I think she's helped a lot of other people do that as well. And no matter how many times somebody tells me that I can't follow my dreams, I will. And I think that that idea came from reading Harry Potter when I was in 5th grade. With this, I'll leave you with a quote from J.K. Rowling. Rowling said, "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." And I think those are words to live by. Thank you.